Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Andrea. It's nice to have you guys here. Today I have another book video. As you'll see, most of the books I'm going to talk about today, all but one book I'm going to talk about today, is on Kindle. With lockdown, I've really embraced the Kindle. So we'll start with the physical book first, so I can get that out of the way. This book is called The Five. It is by Hallie Rubenhold. The Five, The Untold Lives of the Women Killed by Jack the Ripper. And I also, first of all, just generally, I loved this book. It was incredibly well written. It's, for a nonfiction historical book, it was very well done and very, entertaining's not the word, but it was very gripping. Like, it sucked me in and held me, like, gripped in the story. History books, if they take on a more academic tone, can be a little boring. This was not boring, so I do want to read some of her other books. I really loved The Five. If you are interested in Jack the Ripper, you probably won't like this book because it is not about him at all. And that's why I loved it. This book is about the women. If you are interested in women's history, in the everyday lives of women, in the way that women's everyday lives have been in the past, I think you'll like this book. So this is definitely, like, I have this in library form, but I want to get a copy and be able to have it on my shelves because this, I feel like this needs to be in my collection, and not just like as a Kindle version, but like this needs to be up there with The Murder of Helen Jewett, I think, and a few of my other women's history books, because this was just incredible. So The Five tells the story from birth to death of each of the five women claimed to be killed by Jack the Ripper, the canonical five as they're referred to. What was really interesting was it's broken up into 5 parts, and then each part has a few chapters, and so it traces each woman from when she was born, where she was born, what her early childhood was like, what her early adulthood was like, how her life eventually brought her to the Whitechapel area to become a victim of Jack the Ripper. And then her death is just like the last few pages of each part. And it does not, if you're someone who's squeamish about true crime and murder stories and stuff, it doesn't get into the graphic details about what Jack the Ripper did to each of his victims, which I also really appreciated because I've read that, I've seen documentaries, I know about all of that. I was more interested in the women, and so I was really pleased when I got through reading the first woman's story and saw how Rubenhold was going to do this. I was like, I am so into this. This was so well done. It was so fascinating, and I think for me the most fascinating part was just seeing how each of these women was such, not even so much a victim of the murderer, but a victim of their time and their circumstances and the way Victorian lives were, particularly for women, particularly for lower class, working class women. Overall, it was really important to read because we all have heard the name Jack the Ripper, but I don't think any of us, myself included, could give even the first names of even one of the women he killed. And so to become familiar with their stories and to get to know, it's Polly, Annie, Elizabeth, Kate, and Mary Jane. I don't know, I can't describe it, but as a scholar of women's history, as a scholar of feminist rhetoric, of women's rhetoric, this is the kind of historical recovery work that needs to happen. I love that book so much. So diving into the rest, since what I mentioned the last time. First is by Gilly Macmillan, What She Knew. This is a thriller, more of a mystery. I wouldn't really put it in a thriller category, but definitely a mystery, domestic mystery. It's about a child abduction, a single mom, divorced mom, out at the park with her son, playing one day, and he runs up ahead with the dog. He just vanishes. And so it's everything that happens after that, and kind of going behind the scenes of the investigation and the public scrutiny and the way that we judge parents, you know, well, what could they have done differently to prevent their child from going missing? So all of those kinds of thoughts. And I thought it was really well done. This was one that I borrowed through the library. I really enjoyed it. The pacing was good. The character motivations were good. If you're into mysteries, domestic mysteries, and stories that kind of get at some of those broader societal issues, that would be a good one. The next book is by Elle Marr, and it's The Missing Sister. So this one is about a woman who gets called to Paris by the police because her sister has been found dead. And so she's asked to come to Paris to identify the body. Upon arriving in Paris, she finds a note written by, they're twin sisters, and so there's a note written by her twin in their kind of twin language that only she can understand that says, "I'm alive, tell no one." And that's the basic premise of the book. So that's not giving anything away. That's part of the description. And so then the rest of the book is her trying to figure out what happened to her sister, why there's this other body in the morgue, and all of that. Overall, I liked the book. I feel like I'm fairly easy to please. So I really like this book. I'm pretty sure I gave it 5 stars, at least 4 stars on Amazon and Goodreads. I enjoyed it. I think also now that I've written my own book, I'm a lot less harsh when I'm reviewing other people's books. So I thought the story was entertaining. I thought the mystery was well written. It gets a little overcomplicated, and I think for some people that might be a little frustrating. It kind of felt that at times, especially as it kind of neared the ending, that the author was attempting to write a couple stories in one, and there were some things that I kind of wish had been a little bit more spelled out or articulated in the narrative. But overall, I think also it just ended up being a bit, not fantastical, but just not as much of a realistic, nitty, true crime novel, and a little bit more of, okay. And so I enjoyed it. It's just, that's not the direction I thought it was going in. And again, that's something that might irritate some readers, but I like being taken on a journey. So overall, it was really good. I really enjoyed it. It is a bit more of a thriller, I would say. It's not just a mystery. It did keep me engaged. I think I finished the book. I think I read like the last 60% all in one sitting, so I liked it. I thought it was good. So then the next one, also not really a thriller, more of a mystery, but it kind of goes back and forth. So Blood Orange by Harriet Tyce, I think. Thought this one sounded good. So Blood Orange is kind of a legal thriller. Legal domestic thriller. Beth was calling it a domestic noir. I was listening in today on there was an author interview, Facebook Live today, and so Beth had described it as a domestic noir. And I'd say it's got definite noir elements to it. It is a dark book. If you don't like dark books, if you don't like dark subject matter, this gets into emotional abuse, psychological abuse, gaslighting, physical abuse, suicide. There's a lot in this book, but it was really interesting. It was really gripping. You do not like the characters. The female character, once I kind of just accepted she's not meant to be that likable. I don't think the average person would agree with any of her choices. But as you start to see the men that she's involved with, I started to get this better sense of, yes, she's a flawed character, and yes, because she's a barrister and like you'd think she'd be smarter. It shows how even the smartest women can get sucked into really bad, really toxic relationships and can make really bad choices. And so even though I did not agree with her choices, once I kind of shifted my perspective on the character and started really paying attention to how the author was writing her decisions do make sense. And so I did warm to the character eventually. So it is a dark story, but it does have a good mystery alongside, parallel to what is going on for the main character's life. She's also investigating and representing a woman accused of murdering her husband there's no likable male in this story. You hate all of the men. But you know there's something going on in Allison's life, but you don't know what. That's continuing to unfold as you're reading the book. But then there's also the case of Madeline, who's accused of murdering her husband Edwin. And so there's that mystery as well. So you've got these two kind of mysteries going on at the same time, and both are pretty interesting. It also gets kind of behind the scenes of murder cases in the UK, you know, the difference between kind of the solicitor and the barrister and like everything that happens, which I'm always fascinated by. The UK court system is so different, it seems, from the US legal system, but I really did enjoy that book. So those are kind of all of the thrillers. Moving on, this video is going to be long. I'm not sorry about that though. The Cactus by Sarah Haywood. Talk about another character who's not really that likable, but who just ends up winning you over. You know, like by the end of Blood Orange, I was really rooting for Allison. And by the end of The Cactus, I was really rooting for Susan. She's a perfectionist. Everything has to be a certain way. She's very controlling. She can be just a tad bit judgmental. So she's kind of an extreme of a certain archetype of person and character. But as someone who definitely is a bit of a type A personality, who can be very much of a perfectionist, there were elements of her character that I still related to, even though I'm a lot nicer than she is throughout most of the book. But this also, even though I think my thing with The Cactus, to try to keep some of these reviews a little bit more short, the cover and how the book is written makes it feel like it's going to be a rom-com chick lit. This is definitely contemporary women's fiction. It has a romantic element. For the most part, it's about toxic family relationships, as well as how your perception of those relationships and of certain family members may not be as accurate as you think. The book is told through first-person perspective narrative, so you never really get to understand the motivations of the other characters, but you do see Susan start to kind of negotiate and navigate her own assumptions and perspectives and realize that maybe she didn't have it completely right. I struggled a little bit to get into the book because I just felt like this isn't what I was expecting. This isn't what I was prepared for. I thought this was going to be a little bit lighter. I found some of the stuff, I don't want to say triggering, but just the mood I was in at the time. But once I started getting into it, it really won me over, and I ended up really enjoying it. So I would recommend The Cactus, but if you're prepared for a rom-com, dial those expectations down. If you're into contemporary women's fiction and just good storytelling, definitely check out The Cactus by Sarah Haywood. Next, Notting Hill in the Snow by Jules Wake. This is a continuation spin-off of Covent Garden in the Snow, which I read back at Christmas time, and I mentioned, I think, in my last book video, and I loved that book. And this book was no exception. It's set in the same world, so the characters from the first book, from Covent Garden in the Snow, kind of pop up here and there in this one. It's still also set kind of roughly in the same fictional opera house in Covent Garden, behind the scenes world of working in an opera house. So in this book, the main character plays the viola in the orchestra, and she gets wrangled into helping with the Christmas nativity. And this one is pure rom-com, romance, Christmas. I don't care that it's April. Like, we all need a bit of Christmas in our lives every now and then. So I really, really enjoyed this book. I read almost the entirety of it in one sitting. I absolutely love this book. I love the way that Jules Wake, the author, writes the locations. When a book is set in London or set in the UK, like, that is one of the reasons why I'm reading it. So I want to hear about places. I want to feel like I either remember it from my own trips, or I want to have that urge to go look it up on Instagram to see what you're writing about. And she does a really good job of that. And so that becomes part of the experience of reading it. Reading Notting Hill in the Snow really did feel like kind of taking a bit of a trip to London at Christmas time, and it was amazing. So another London book is by Christine Riccio or Riccio, I'm not sure how you would pronounce it, who apparently is a YouTuber, a booktuber. I've never watched any of her videos, but she's apparently got a pretty large channel. I had seen this book, I think just on an Instagram post. I think it popped up in my feed one day, added it to, saved it to my books to look up collection, and then eventually looked it up and was able to borrow this one from my library, which was great. This one, okay, here's the tricky thing about this one. I did not really like it for the first like 30-40%. I was just like, this is really kind of young. I'm not really into this. The characters are like 18, 19. They're all college students on a study abroad trip for a semester in London, which I was originally intrigued by because, you know, that sounded good. And I've read YA before. And so I thought, okay, but I just was like, I don't know. These characters just seem a little immature for me. Like I'm not really getting it. And then at about 40%, you get to the twist. And I don't really want to say anything more than that. You at 40%, I think, according to my Kindle, that was where it's like, oh, this is what this story is going to be about. From that point on, I was absolutely in love with it. And I really don't want to say any more than that because I think, I'm not sure I would have enjoyed it as much, and I don't think I would have enjoyed that moment as much if I had known that was going to happen. If you want a story about, oh, how do I phrase this without totally giving it away? It's a book about choices, and it's a book about, yeah, it's a book about choices. That's all I really want to say. I really enjoyed it. I really, really enjoyed it. What I keep coming back to, and if you've been paying attention to any of these reviews, what you have probably started to pick up on over the course of this video or the previous book videos I've done, is I like stories. If you tell me a good story, I am there. And I will forgive a lot with the character development, the plot development, the structure, all of that, if at least the story is good. Because at the end of the day, just telling a really good story is like the most important thing. And this book told a really good story. I definitely would recommend Again But Better because it just, yeah, I borrowed it from the library, but I am tempted to order a physical copy, both to support the author, but also because it's a book I would like to have in my collection because it was really good. Another book I would, even though I did buy this one on Kindle, I am tempted to order a paperback copy because, again, I'd like to have it in my collection. And that is Honeymoon Alone by Nicole Macaulay. I think that's how you pronounce her last name. Really shouldn't pick a favorite of what I've read, you know, the previous month. But this is definitely up there. I mean, I read a lot of really good books last month, but I really loved this book. So this book is about a girl named Lucy who feels like she's never really done anything in her life, who feels like she's always made the safe choice. So her sister has just gotten married and is super indecisive, so her sister booked 2 of everything and then made the last minute decision of what she would do. So she booked 2 honeymoons and then ended up only going on the one, but in the process forgot to cancel the honeymoon in London. And so her sister, the maid of honor, decides on a whim to go on that honeymoon by herself and to go stay in the hotel and just have a trip to London. Oh, this book had so much. It has a character that you really relate to and connect with. It's got London at Christmas time. It has a bit of a mystery. It's got the romance. It's got everything. It's a feel-good, happy book. It was a fast read that towards the end I found myself wanting to slow down to make it last longer, but also I couldn't put it down. I had to know what was going to happen. So I absolutely loved it. I highly, 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 highly recommend it. It was just so good. I really loved it. And if I have one complaint about the book, it's not actually about the book. It's about the fact that I found this amazing new author and it's her first book and her next book isn't slated until 2023. I'm just like, no. I love when I find a new author and it's like there's a whole back catalog that I can find. So I'm a bit gutted about that because like I'm just so ready to dive into her next book, but I've got to wait like almost 3 more years. She also has a brilliant Instagram account, and I've been really enjoying following and chatting with her on Instagram. Yeah, I love that book. I'm really tempted to reread it again. Probably not this month, but maybe next month. It was so good. The next books, it's kind of 2, and I would recommend, so these next ones, these are by Courtney Giardina. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Courtney's another author who I've been following and chatting with on Instagram. And so this is Behind the Strings is book 1, and then Slow Dancing on Main Street is book 2. You will want to buy them both at the same time, because when you finish Behind the Strings, you're gonna want to go straight into Slow Dancing on Main Street. This is a genre or a subgenre of romance that I don't normally go for, because I'm definitely a books set in London or books set in the UK kind of girl. But this does get an aspect of my personality that I don't really talk about. I definitely don't read as many books in this kind of subgenre niche as I should. So this kind of is that small town girl, small town life, country life, that as someone who's lived in Kansas and has family from Wisconsin, southern Wisconsin, there is something about small towns. Even here in Arizona, Sierra Vista is definitely that kind of small town kind of vibe. And so it's about a character named Celia who is kind of raised in a small town, ends up moving to Nashville. It's kind of set behind the scenes of the country music world, which again, is someone who grew up just absolutely loving country music. I don't listen to it as much anymore, but that was definitely my kind of teen and early 20s. I just really liked it. It was fun. It was a fast read. It's just a really good story. Like I keep saying, I like a good story, and this was a good story. The characters make sense. The plot development moves pretty quickly. Behind the Strings kind of has a bit of a cliffhanger ending. If I were reading it when it first came out, I think according to the publishing dates, there was a 4-year gap between the two. I think I would have been very irritated. So this was a case where I was glad that it was a late discovery for me of the author, because book 2 was already there and I was able to download it right away. So yeah, if you're looking for just a fun romance, and if you're intrigued by the whole Nashville scene, I think you'd really enjoy that. So, and Courtney also has a really great Instagram. I'll try to put everyone's Instagram handles on the screen as well, for those authors who I'm following. And then the last book to mention is by Melanie Hudson, and it's The Last Letter from Juliet. And I need to put my Kindle down for this. That book ripped my heart in two and then delicately stitched it back together. I really wasn't sure if I should read that book right now, because it's set between the present day and World War II. World War II stories can be pretty down, but it is just such a beautiful, brilliant love story set between the two times. The characters are so beautifully written. It just paints such a beautiful picture of this story and these characters and everything that they went through. It's got this kind of sweeping romance from the past, but also the present day story is a woman who is really just desperately trying to piece her life back together and figure out what comes next after the death of her husband. So the book starts several months or more after her husband has passed away, and she's still kind of just shut in her home and not really going out and doing stuff, and she's asked to come to Cornwall by an uncle to help solve this kind of village issue over an apostrophe. Read the book, it'll make sense. And once she's there, she finds the memoirs of Juliet, who was an ATA girl, an air traffic, I can't remember what it stands for, but she was one of the amazing women, and it's based on an actual thing, one of the amazing women who delivered planes around the UK during World War II. So these women would fly Spitfires and other fighter planes to different air bases around the UK. It was one way that women were allowed to participate, and it was one way that women were allowed to fly during World War II, because obviously they weren't allowed to be fighter pilots. She starts reading Juliet's memoirs, and so that's how that story unfolds, and it takes you back up to kind of the present day, and It was just beautiful. I did cry, not as much as I've cried with other World War II books, so that was good. I was happy about that. But overall, it was so beautifully and brilliantly written, and it was another book that I read in pretty much one day. Once I got started, I just could not put it down. I had to know more about Juliet and about all of the characters. All of the village characters are really fun. It's kind of got Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society. I always butcher that title, but you know what I'm talking about. It's got a very similar vibe. If you liked the Guernsey Literary Society book, I think you'd like The Last Letter from Juliet. And if you just also like general World War II fiction, World War II historical dramas, historical romance, I absolutely loved it. I mean, really, I did good. I had some good picks. There were, like, looking at my Kindle again, it's hard to pick a favorite book of last month because I really loved pretty much all of the books I read. I wholly recommend all the books I've mentioned. Judging by how long this video is, I definitely think I need to be filming one of these every like 6 to 8 books that I read, because I have a lot of things to say about the books that I read, and I really enjoy talking about them. Let me know if you've read any of these books, or if any of these books sound like ones that you would be interested in reading. Let's chat books down in the comments. Give the video a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe if you're not subscribed. Also make sure that you are following my book/author-writer account, Andrea J. Severson, on Instagram, because I have been putting up little mini reviews of things as I'm reading them. So if you don't want to wait until the next time I film one of these videos, then you can find some of my mini reviews and thoughts on there. So yeah, that's it for now. Thanks for watching this video, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.